back to another episode of the Active Action Podcast. It's me, your host, Dr. Nazif, back again with another amazing guest. Today we have with us Kurt Uhlir, and Kurt is the Chief Marketing Officer of Easy Home Search, known globally also as the king of scaling companies. The topic of today's podcast is how leaders cut waste and build revenue in the AI era. So we are using artificial intelligence in our life more or less, and that is being integrated day after day. So without further ado, let's get into today's topic and fun discussion with our esteemed guest. So Kurt, how are you doing this morning, my man?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Would you like to let our audiences know a little bit about yourself, apart from what I say?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as an adult, I've now been successful in 11 industries. I've been part of more than 60 funding rounds and exits. And so that's where I've been an executive, a leader at the company, more if you count people that I've advised and been on boards for. But those are companies that have, some cases we had an $880 million IPO, an $8.1 billion exit. I've been part of another hypergrowth company. I'm the person that the venture capital groups and the private equity teams will come to when either revenue is stalled or they're spending too much money, but they're not seeing revenue go the way they want, or it's figuratively a ship on fire, regardless of the industry, usually business to business, and they're like, we need somebody to help fix this, usually from the marketing and sales side, and so they're going to bring me in for that. With that said, I'm at this point, I've done more than 250 paid keynotes on servant leadership around the world and probably more than 1,000 total paid speaking gigs. So I think part of the reason is because I've been successful in so many different industries, and what I've seen works well with people is actually what works really well with AI and the changing skills that we need for people that are using that.
Thank you so much, Kurt, for that wonderful introduction and letting our audiences know about a little bit about yourself. You used a term that I like a lot, that is servant leadership, and a lot of our listeners might not be familiar with this term. Would you kindly explain to them what servant leadership is?
Yeah, I will make it really simple for people too, because I think people overcomplicate leadership. For me, there's just two types of leadership. There's the authoritative leadership, which we're typically used to, which is do what I say, how I say in the time frame, or you're fired. Now, that may not feel quite so bad if it comes from a nice boss, but at the end of the day, you're hiring people, and we've all worked for somebody where they say, these are the specific things I want you to do. The servant leader takes a different approach. There's a job, I'm hiring you into a role, but as a servant leader, I acknowledge two things. One, the first thing is I'm hiring you to do stuff that I don't want to do myself. And I'm also acknowledging that I'm actually not wanting those things. What I'm wanting is the business outcomes out of those. At which point then the servant leader acknowledges, because I want business outcomes out of this, my job comes from not telling you just to do better. My job, I get my business outcomes by acknowledging that I need to help serve you to reach those business outcomes. Some cases that could be tough love. Some cases it could be, well, say in the case of sales, you're not doing things the exact way that I would do it. Let me show you how to do that shoulder to shoulder, and I coach you through doing it so that eventually I do not have to teach you anymore and you can take this and run. And so that servant leader says, my job is to serve you to get the outcomes that I want.
Thanks so much for explaining that. And dear audiences, I hope you got a little bit of an idea what servant leadership is and how that even differs from authoritative leadership. More of a time we have seen from our past experiences that authoritative leadership has been dominant in companies which are kind of going from top to bottom approach, but servant leadership is also a very popular concept, and that is like more collaborative, working with within the team and within the team members, something we often see in agile project management as well. So Kurt, can you let our audiences know why many companies are still using growth playbooks built for a different market, and what are actually the growth playbooks from your idea?
Growth playbook, especially let's think about private equity groups. They tend to buy up a lot of companies, whether they're general contractors or they're large software companies. So they've bought maybe 50 to 100 companies in the past, and there's a specific way. Literally, it used to be a book they would have for sports. Run these plays. These are the type of ads you run. This is the amount of money you should be spending for a ratio of new ads to sales. And some of those things still make sense, but they're often built for an outdated era in a lot of ways. They were built that way because a lot of times the funding groups, they think that they're right and they're very wise. I love most of the VCs and PE groups that I've worked with. but they also, like, you have that CEO, that authoritative leader, who tends to be really good at their job, but he or she, they think that they're micromanaging because they're making all these decisions. And what they don't realize, to your point about servant leadership, that those old playbooks, they're trying to push down decisions from the top, thinking that they see everything that needs to be made. When in the fact, especially as companies grow, when you get over 50 people, 500, 5,000 people, I'm in the upper two levels of the leadership see such a small fraction of the decisions that are made every single day that affect the customers. And so the authoritative leader thinks they're seeing all these things and making decisions, but they don't realize that it takes the servant leader to allow the organization to bring issues to you before you would have otherwise seen it, to let you about things before the data makes it so evident so you could make more wise decisions. And so they come in from this outside approach because they are wise people that have had great success, but they don't realize that they're lacking the data that this other type of leadership and these playbooks would give them.
Okay, thanks for explaining that. And so we are talking about different kinds of leadership today, and we have known about authoritative leadership and servant leadership and growth playbook. How do you think the outdated leadership and the marketing habits quietly waste money, time, and team energy and ultimately drains down the team?
The outdated leadership, especially that authoritative leadership, it takes significantly longer. In my research, it takes between 3 and 5 times longer to uncover issues or better strategies that you could be implementing, where servant leadership would show that to you in 1/3 of the time, 1/8 of the time at times. And so that's one of the ways it causes it. The other issue we start to see is with AI right now, things are changing so quickly. And the good thing is, many of our people in leadership, they're reading all the articles about what's possible. The problem is they're also reading a lot of the articles about what's possible. And so they're believing things. And so much of the data, when you actually look at AI implementation, the value is not there. You look at one of the largest now subsidiaries of Anthropic and OpenAI or something, is not actually like their core AI. It's a group of what they call forward engineers that they send in. Palantir has done to say, we'll come set up demos, we'll come set things. So they're basically building an outsourced team of engineers to implement Anthropic, because the main industries are not seeing that. And so from that outdated leadership style, they're just going to hear from their friends, hey, you could replace marketing, or you could replace part of your outbound sales team or your engineering team with AI, or do it for a tenth of the cost. And so they start forcing that in an organization. The servant leadership is going to come in and be like, no, let's make tests and see how this works. And I want to hear input from you all. And I believe we could do this maybe 10 times faster. But I spent 2 days this week slowing down to try to build some automation within Claude Cowork, which is going to be great. But if you listen to a typical YouTube video, they'll say, well, that could be done in 15 minutes. No, I'm the inventor on 20 plus end patents that Meta and Facebook and Apple and all these others have licensed. And it took me 2 days to get something now. It's really complicated, but your old outdated leadership style isn't going to believe that. They're just going to say, oh, tomorrow it's unicorns and rainbows. Like let's just do that. And so you need the servant leadership style, or just being open to that. Because otherwise, it's not just that you might be very costly and that maybe you get rid of some really great people on your team, but you waste time for your company. And so if you waste time where maybe you should have gone slower or more measured in building out some new marketing habits, or you, in case of say marketing, people used to write a lot of fluffy, bad search engine optimization content, which AI does now. It didn't work well when people wrote it and you went to Fiverr for those people. It doesn't work now when AI writes it. And so you waste money in either one of those, as opposed to changing, let's say, the news search everywhere optimization with how content gets written in a different way now, which can help all parts of the growth funnel.
Would be your suggestion, because we are talking about when AC optimization was being done by people versus now AC optimization is being done by AI. But even when it's done by AI, there might be errors or not. So what would be your suggestion on how to actually optimize the use of AI for their best serving purpose?
Great question. So first of all, anything that any of the models tell you that this is great SEO, just when you ask generally or what should change, is not great SEO. The mathematically large language models, their entire thing, now they're very smart for a lot of things, but is guessing at what the next word is going to be. So if you think in terms of strategy, when you ask for an SEO strategy, they're going to give you the average of the bell curve for what that could be. So the top human performers will always outperform that. Even then, you bring in one of the top performers, you bring in me, my friend Corey, who leads a huge team out of Turkey. We use AI every day, but we also are very keenly aware, even bringing in our frameworks and the wisdom that we have. We've looked through like 100 plus Google patents and all of that. We have these frameworks, but I also have realized from all my testing not to trust the AI. So I may have 27 different steps that the AI works through, and maybe there's 5 checkpoints in that I actually, as a human, me or somebody on my team, needs to go and check things. As an example, I have built an automation to create, not SEO-wise, but I've created an automation that creates incredible AI only podcasts from content that we have. It doesn't just work through automatically because there's a deep research process that takes place. And then I need to have a sanitization check. Humans need to check that. We need to have like a transcript outline before we can write things. Just whether somebody reads it or not, before you would have had 2 to 3 researchers doing the work we would have done, plus editors cutting things up. But at no point will I trust any of it because I've done 16 episodes of that, and in every single one of them, it has failed in different points and sometimes multiple times. But I can also get an episode out in somewhere between 15 and 17 minutes now. So it's never as good as like fireside chat you and I are having, but for compared to most podcasts that are out there, the research is better, the results are better. You have no idea their AI with how we're creating the voices for it. But I would sell it for things. Do not say these competitor names. And let's just say 1 out of 15 times, it will mention the competitor names and maybe mention them favorably. Like, that would happen in writing as well, and so if you don't have a human involved at some point, your search engine optimization is, 1, gonna be average, and 2, is gonna take your brand in a direction that you do not want it, which for a big company is an unbound risk.
So true. Thanks so much for explaining that, Kurt. I really, really appreciate those words of wisdom, and I'm sure our listeners would also benefit from understanding that how can they use the optimization of AI in their work, especially in coding and SEO. You talked a while ago. You talked about wasted energy, so that actually stood out to me. From your experience, what do you think? What separates companies that create revenue momentum versus those who always stay busy in their work but are not making any real progress? So, what
Great
is the
question.
separation?
It's a distinction in how do they think about things temporally. So companies that do not grow as much as they could or start to lose revenue momentum. A lot of private equity companies are in this, but not all. Is that they will only look at one time frame for how they're investing marketing dollars or sales effort. And so what I say by that is it's usually a 2 to 12 month time frame, and all their effort is based on we spend $1, and within 2 to 12 months, how many dollars do we get back? There's nothing wrong with that being the bulk of your thing, but the companies that build revenue momentum, in my experience and how I implement my framework, is that they have 3 different time horizons that they look at, and they make sure that when they're having conversations about spending money, that they're tracking different things for each, but they're also they don't bounce between them in the same conversation. So they'll still have a 2 to 12 month window. They'll have either a 12 to 24 month or a 12 to 36 month revenue window. So I spend $1 and imagine that you get $0 back for 24 months. Now you can track leading indicators to know if you're on the right track, but you're not going to get $1 revenue back. And then there's either a 24-month plus or a 36-month plus, depending on where they cut off that middle time frame. And when they do that, now they still have the conversation about ads and other things, but they're able to have not a discussion necessarily about brand building, which is a marketing term, but about how do you build trust with the part of the market that never would have said yes to you, that you would have wasted sales dollars on, and they still would have chose a less risky option because like 79% of companies on the B2B side will always choose one of the top 3 brands in an industry over anybody else. And so what you don't realize is you might get 10 people to sign up on your website for your SaaS company, and 7 of them will go through the process. And of those 7, they never would have said yes to you, even though you wasted all the sales time and marketing effort and brought them to events, maybe and things, because they're still just going to choose one of the largest companies in the industry because nobody wants to be the person that brought in the bad decision. And so we'll say CRMs. Nobody gets fired from bringing in Salesforce or Pipedrive. Are they great solutions? No. There are much better solutions that are out there, but it's a least risky not get fired decision.
Thanks so much, Kurt, for explaining that. Let us talk a little bit about leadership now, because leadership is a very important aspect for professional development, and also if you are working or if you wish to maintain a team. So oftentimes we have seen the leadership becomes ineffective when their effort is all over the place. It's scattered, it's not focused. So how leaders can move from scattered efforts to focused action across their teams.
A couple of things. So one, doing those different time horizons are very helpful because while instinctively we know that we should be putting in efforts, whether it's on engineering or marketing, on things that aren't going to pay off today. What happens, part of scattering happens is we start today when things are okay, or we have a little bit of extra margin, we plan some things out. But then because we have not separated out the time horizons, we have not said 15% of our engineering effort needs to be spent in that second time frame I gave you, or 15% of our marketing budget. What happens when you start to lose margin in the team, things get busy, as they always do. People they snapshot from left to right, right? While they decided they needed to do that that middle time frame thing, they go, well, we don't have time for that right now. But even though that was the best decision, they planned on it, but now they're feeling emotional because maybe they lost a client, or it's Friday and we're in the month and we haven't hit some numbers. And so then they start to snap back, and it starts to feel very scattered, not just to the leadership team, but to the board when they're reporting back, and especially to the people that are actually implementing the work. That's part of it. And the another big part of it is things are changing so much, especially with AI right now. Most leaders have not figured, and most individuals have not figured out, how do they segment getting stuff done with the new things we're implementing versus how do I keep trying things. They help co-lead a group of like 200 senior executives around the United States, so like mid-market companies. And almost all of them feel they're spending so much more time doing personal learning and development today, YouTube videos, what is Claude capable of, than they ever did. And then a lot of them are struggling with, okay, but how do I maintain implementing what works, trying the new things, which we know works, versus doing some test things? And I'm like, exactly that. Segment your time out, go train your team to lead on the skills that you have so that you're not scatterbraining, you're not making these efforts scattered across the team. And you take one junior person and you go mad scientist the next thing that could completely change how they're doing work. But you let you and somebody else try this mad scientist implementing things until it works, then go change the workflows, as opposed to just continually changing them back and forth every day.
And so when you time block and when you spend a dedicated amount of time understanding, like, for example, your team is doing 100 kinds of thing together. They're working on their personal development. They're working on your projects. So you have to think of a way to integrate that. The things that they're learning from their personal development projects, they can actually integrate those into your work. So to have all these conversations, you need specific dedicated time, and how Kurt mentioned segments of thinking. So thanks so much, Kurt, for mentioning that. Back to the servant leadership. There are many myths about servant leadership across the companies. So what do you think some of the myths servant leadership contains that keeps companies from growing stronger and faster?
Yeah, great question. I think three stand out to me. One is that servant leadership, that the most important trait that you have to have as a servant leader is empathy. To me, that's saying the most important tool for building a house is a hammer. Well, no, it's one of them. Empathy can be toxic as well, in many cases as well. Another one is, to your point, that that they're not being directive, and so that makes it slow. Actually, I find that servant leadership teams hold themselves to accountability much more than an authoritative leadership ever does, because for two reasons. One is the authoritative leader is telling about the tasks that want done. The servant leader is talking about the outcomes that I want out of it. And because of that, you're holding yourself accountable. I actually don't think I can hold you accountable. I think that I can get you to do what I say, but that's different than getting a commitment. That first myth about empathy. Empathy matters. I want you to realize I care about you as a person. I care about you, and I know you have a life outside of work. But because servant leader kind of does that, it says, hey, look, if you have a kid that gets really sick, if you get it thrust into elder care, that's gonna drastically reduce your efficiency in a couple of days. If I have the environment where you bring that to me, well, then we can get you back up to speed as quickly as possible as well. And but in that case, when I say I need these outcomes, you're looking for new ways to help me reach those outcomes. And so you're holding yourself accountable. I'm pointing out, this is what I expect. And I'm having difficult discussions because I'm now your coach. Some cases there's the drill sergeant in the gym, and in some cases there's the coach that walks in and gives you a hug and says, I'm so glad you're here. You could be either type of those leaders and maybe you switch between them, but in both cases, they're trying to make you better. And so that the servant leadership does that innately, but people don't realize that because they think as that authoritative leader, if I tell you get this done by Thursday, well, that's the way it's going to be. That's like telling somebody to get healthy by just go eat better or work out in the gym more. That's different than changing how they see themselves, making them more capable.
Thanks so much for explaining that. From your experience, Kurt, how do you think serving your team can lead to better outcomes, better decisions, and fast execution? Serving your team well, how can that lead to these aspects?
If they know what to expect, it's a lot easier to show up and perform well when there's a foundation of what's truly expected in the organization. And that is shown not just in the words on the website, but in the actions of people. And I say that so when everybody knows what the outcomes expected, that's different than the tasks, because what often happens is people get assigned tasks by an authoritative leader, and then you don't know that those tasks are not reaching the outcomes that you're wanting, and then you get a bad performance review. You get talked down to because they're not getting the outcome, but they never discussed outcomes with you, or they barely discussed it. And so from that serving perspective, I'm making sure you understand the outcomes. I'm also doing things where the culture that's on the website, which so many companies have, usually you can't actually identify it, or it's warm and fuzzy feelings. My culture things are going to be written on the website and things you would see in people's actions. I want you to have strong opinions, but hold them loosely. I've been very successful. I might also be wrong next time, but that's one of the core things I want. I want people that thrive in healthy conflict, which I do not always do well. Well, the servant leader realizes if I want other people to do this, I have to not just tell them that this is what I want. I have to show them specifically, this is the hard part for authoritative leaders. I have to show them when I have failed. Because serving means not just saying, hey, I'm the superhero that wins the gold medal all the time. It means this is what I'm expecting of myself. And Susie brought it into me that said, I didn't handle that last conversation well. And I asked her if it was okay for me to share that. And here's how I didn't handle it well. And when you do that and you start to serve your people, trying to coach them to be better, you will be amazed at how much more they will open up, not just about maybe where they haven't got it better and they need some coaching, but then that will create an environment too where you're pointing out from a serving perspective the outcomes we want. And I'm telling you that the outcomes I want, and I'm telling you also where the decisions that I or the leadership team has made maybe wasn't the right decision when we look back at how the data is played out. Well, then people will come to us and say, I don't have the data yet, but I think we're going down the same path in a different part of the business. And so it's not that they're right about is the company going in a bad place. It's that you as a leader are not in a place to make better decisions without having that information, which sometimes comes from a feel or sometimes it comes from data. Usually I'll have somebody on my team and a customer success team come to me and go, I think I think customers are starting to be unhappy about this, but I can't articulate it. And I will ask 5 or 25 follow-up questions, and we will start to uncover something that we need to start tracking some data differently than we were. And what my environment does from a decision-making perspective, I find that now I'm able to, instead of waiting 24 months on average, as we've looked back at this at my companies and others, 24 months to correct a bad decision. And I say a bad decision because nobody intends to make a bad decision, but we've all made them. And so 24 months later, on average, before you uncover these major strategy decisions, my teams uncover them in 6 months. So imagine if every time you would have otherwise waited 24 months before you could correct a mistake in the strategy, you could figure out 18 months earlier and how much that compounds over time. So that's what making better decisions does. When people bring up things that maybe they actually know this is a big issue, or maybe they don't have that yet. And so my job is being wise, having been in a lot of successful and not successful companies, is I can make good decisions, but I need the data to do it.
But I wanted to ask you, Kurt, how can the listeners connect with you, or what you're currently working on that our listeners can benefit from, if you can give an overview of that?
Yeah, my personal website at Kurt Uhlir, KURTUHLIR.com would be my main site. It'll send you out anywhere else if you want to connect with me. But I write a lot about this. I talk about case studies, success stories of people. I work full time for a holding company called Easy Home Search of the United States. We have several subsidiaries as well, but we're a massive real estate portal in the United States and growing into Canada soon. So that's I'm doing that. But on the side, I'm helping build this community of senior executives in the United States, purpose-driven senior leaders, companies like a 10 million to 500 million, because it's lonely at the top and things are changing so much right now. We're trying to figure out together, how do I share with you when your job, hey, here's what I'm working on. Before I go present it to my board, can I run this past you and other purpose-driven leaders and vice versa? And do that in a way that's both private, but also doesn't exist anywhere that's out there.
Dear listeners, I would be putting Kurt's link and information in our podcast and videos bios. Thank you so much, Kurt, for joining today's podcast
Thank you for having me.
and for conveying your words of wisdom with our listeners. So I'm sure they benefited from them a lot. And dear listeners, again, I also urge you to check out Kurt's website and connect with him to see how you can benefit from his services. Again, thank you, dear listeners, for joining today's episode. It's me, Dr. Nazif, signing out. We'll see you again in another episode on another day. Take care until then.